So thank you, everybody, and welcome. My name is Russ Harding. I am VP of Engineering at EQ Engineered, a strategic digital consultancy out of New Hampshire in the United States of America. What I wanted to talk about today is basically the idea that as a new software engineer coming onto our teams, we generally, what I've experienced, I should say, is that as new engineers come in, they're handed a laptop that's got nothing on it. And they're expected to go from that laptop to being a productive member of the engineering team in a fairly quick amount of time. So how do they do that? Well, my experience over the years has been a somewhat painful process. There's a bunch of documentation that is never maintained, and your team leads are getting constantly bombarded, and the rest of the team is kind of being disrupted by this new person, at least for the first couple of days, while they're trying to just get everything installed, and I can't connect to my database, and I can't, it doesn't compile, right? So how can we improve that, manual onboarding problem that we have and actually move us into a position where potentially I can, hopefully during this demo, I can take us from a bare metal machine, which I have set up and I'll jump over to and get started here, to a running demo app, the eShop from the Aspire project, just to kind of show that, we can go from bare metal to a running application in hopefully 30 minutes. We'll be really close, but I think we can get there. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kick over here, and the first thing I wanna talk about is kind of two major technologies that we're gonna lean into. We've heard a lot about a .NET Aspire over the course of .NET Conference, and it's an amazing tool. I've been using it for the last 2 years, almost since it came out. But I also wanna talk a little bit before that in talking about Winget. And I don't know how many of you might be familiar with Winget, but it is a tool, and I'll kind of pull up a little bit better screen, and I'll show you on Visual Studio Code here in a minute. But basically, it's a tool from Microsoft that allows you to script your software installation. So as you can see here, kind of in the screenshot that I have here, I have scripted out, Visual Studio to be installed, web deploy, Git, Tortoise SVN, Postman, and a few other pieces of software. So I'm going to go ahead and jump over to my desktop application here, and I have none of those things, right? If I go search for Visual Studio, right, it doesn't know anything about it. It seems to know something about these things, but it's just going to take me out to the internet and say, hey, do you want to go ahead and install these things? So it doesn't actually know about any of these. None of this stuff has been installed yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start actually running some of these, and then I'll go back to the slide deck and talk a little bit about this. But what I'm going to do is I have a Winget configuration file, which I'll show everybody, and we'll talk through it a little bit. And I'm just basically going to say, hey, Winget import, right, and install, and all of the files that those are showing you in that slide deck, everything is configured in this JSON file. Now you can use it one at a time and install individual pieces of software. But if you have a new engineer and somebody new, doesn't have to be an engineer, it can be anybody on the team, and you want to just very quickly say, hey, here's a configuration file. I want you to just open up a terminal and run this command. Just do this, and it'll just install all the things that you need to install. So I'm going to run this. We'll go through a couple of very quick reboots because we're going to install a lot of software. And then you'll see that over the course of this conversation, we'll be up and running. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK on this. You see that it's going to get started, and it's going to look at all the files that I think that I have told it that I want it to install. I'm accepting all my package agreements and all my source agreements. So it's going to go ahead and get started, and it's going to start with Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to jump back over to the slide deck while it's doing a little bit of that work, and we'll go through and we'll talk about a little bit more about this. So like I said, so we've got Winget, we've got these configuration files. There's a couple of different alternative ways that you can use this. Like I was starting to say, you can manage your software. So what you see here in a couple of these slides here is that I have a configuration file, which I'll show here in a minute. But if I don't know a software package that I want to install, there is a search functionality. So here in the top right-hand corner of my slide deck here, you can see that I can go to my command terminal. I can say Winget search, and I can say, well, it's Visual Studio or it's Git or something like that. And then it comes back and it tells me all of the different SKUs that Winget knows about, so that I could potentially script out any single one of these. All right, Visual Studio 2017, 2019, Enterprise, Professional, Community, right? Visual Studio 2026. So you could set up all of these things. And if you don't know what they are, you can search for them. If you aren't sure if a package is available, you can search for it. There's a lot of stuff that's available. In the bottom screenshot that I took here, right, I'm also exporting all of the software that is potentially installed on my machine. So I want to go ahead and say, show me everything that's already here, right? So you can see, oh, I got IIS 10, I've got .NET 10, I've got Visual Studio installed, SQL Server 2025, right? And all of these things, and you can see kind of toward the bottom, I've got OneDrive, and I've got Microsoft Edge here kind of in the middle, and Outlook for Windows. So my point is it knows about a lot of software. So there's a lot of things that you can very quickly script out and just hand to a new engineer. I like to think about this as a little akin to your infrastructure as code. It's not quite as advanced as some organizations that'll give us an image for a machine or something to that tune. But every single project has its own custom configurations. And you can take this and I'll pull over Visual Studio Code real quick while this continues to run. And so let me see if I can put this over here and have it dock. No, not well. All right, we're making this worse. That was nice. There we go. So I'm going to pull this back up. Where that went to? Yeah, demo effect, right? So we're going to pull this back up, and I don't need any of these widgets. Thank you very much, machine behind me. We'll ignore that. We'll let that keep running. And so I've got Visual Studio Code here. And so I've got my Winget configuration, and let me close everything else so we can just focus on this one thing. Close others and close. And we're going to look at this. So you see this configuration is really pretty straightforward. It's a nice, simple JSON file. You can take this, you can put this into your source control. You can have some quick documentations that you can share with the team about how it is. But you can source control this so that everybody that's coming in, if you have to make changes to your software package structure, you add new requirements that developers need to put on their machines, you can use this. And you can very quickly just define, right, Visual Studio package ID, Visual Studio Professional, right, MVM for Node, Visual Studio Code, Web Deploy, Git, Tortoise, Postman. We're going to go ahead and I got Postman in here twice. We're going to install WSL. We're going to install Podman, Notepad, right? All of these things we're going to have installed, and you can still kind of see it's cranking away in the background. And I'm installing Node LTS right now, so it's almost done. So it's at WSL, and it'll install these couple others. We'll have to, like I said, we'll jump through a couple of quick reboots, and then we'll at that point be able to have this. We'll be at the point where we'll be able to clone down this code for the eShop, and we'll be able to get ready to actually open up Visual Studio. So as this is finishing up here, actually that finished up. So that was really great. So now so the next step here is I'm going to want to try and run Podman. Now it's going to tell me no, and that Podman needs to install a couple of extra things on its own, but that's okay. Machine and net. So it's going to tell me that Podman pod, right? So it's going to pull down a blob for Podman. It's going to tell me that it needs to install a couple of things and then it needs to do a reboot. So we'll do that real quick, right? And we'll let it do its thing. And we'll flip back over to the slide deck while it's doing a quick reboot. This will only take a moment. So while that is happening, I'll jump back over to our slide deck, and we will jump down to the next step, which is going to be .NET Aspire, which we're going to get to here pretty quick once we get this machine back up and running. And in .NET Aspire, there's a lot of functionality. I think that we've probably heard a lot about it. It's a fantastic tool for your different teams, right? And what I want to kind of emphasize, and I think we hear a lot about what a fantastic tool it is and how it's a great tool for your development environment and how it interacts with building cloud and distributed systems and your orchestration and your availability. But I also want to kind of stress that it is also a fantastic tool for your non-cloud environments as well. I'm going to keep talking about this, but this machine is back up, so I want to keep the demo portion of this going because I want to see if we can get this completely ready by the end of this half hour. Let's see if I can type my password in correctly. Yes, no. And let me check my password, and that looks correct. And there we go. Much better. So we'll come back in here, and we'll finish up with Podman real quick, and then we'll continue talking a little bit about .NET Aspire while we finish these quick steps up. And I'll pull my Visual Studio Code off to the side here so that I have my notes. And so we're going to finish installing Podman. We're going to go ahead and Podman machine start. So all of those pieces of software that we just watched the Winget config go and install, they're all here. They're all running, right? We have the WSL in the background, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time configuring Podman. So I'm just going to go with the quick and easy versions, but it's running. So, I've been able to do all of that. So now what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and git clone eShop from GitHub, right? So we saw that I installed Git. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that. That's going to come down here pretty quick. And we're going to CD into it. And I'm going to go ahead and open Visual Studio, right? So I've got actual Visual Studio 2026 here. We'll skip all of this and we'll start Visual Studio. And we'll go to the eShop project and we'll open this up. And you're going to see that, I don't have all the workloads installed. So that is, that's something that it doesn't do. It installs the base software. But as soon as you go and open Visual Studio and I open up the eShop solution, so what's going to happen is Visual Studio is going to take a look at that solution and it's going to say, you don't have what you need installed. So we're going to go ahead and let Visual Studio install that for us. So this will only take a couple of moments to finish up itself. So I'll jump back to the slide deck again. And I want to talk, keep talking a little bit about .NET Aspire. And, I use it quite frequently and my teams are using it quite frequently in an on-premises kind of environment, right? So we're still using that strong orchestration, that strong configuration. We are using all the observability, the logging. We use it very tight, very, very extensively for any kind of custom operations that we might need in order to kind of maintain our environment. So there are some CLIs that we've built, some other tools that we've built that help us maintain our database structures and other functionality that we use both in the Aspire dashboard, but we are using the Aspire dashboard as kind of an analog for our pipeline experience as well. So all of these things are in our Aspire dashboard, are also in our development pipelines, really making it a lot easier for anybody in the development team, not just one of the software engineers, but your QAs or your project managers or VAs or anybody else out there to be able to execute on certain functionality. Say, an application needs to be redeployed or database needs to be re-imported or we need to create scripts to be able to hand off to somebody in the security team. All of those things that we have, created processes for in the different projects, they can be exposed both through Aspire as custom actions, as well as in our pipelines. So we just kind of, again, using it, again, sort of like our QA automation. So as we're using Playwright, right? We've built Playwright into the Aspire. So you have all of these different processes and devices and dependencies. And to the point here as well is that when and if we decide we want to go to the cloud, we're in a pretty good place because we have all of this information kind of ready to go. So I'm going to take that. Let's take a peek at our Visual Studio installation. So it is almost done, and we are 15 minutes in. So I want to just kind of say again, the goal here is to take a brand new machine, bare metal, a brand new engineer, without having to kind of hold their hands through the process and onboard them in the morning and have them show up to stand up and be able to say, I have my machine up and running, the code downloaded, and the project runs on my machine. Now, they're going to have questions about, business logic, and that's a bigger conversation on education, as everybody knows as they come in. But we've taken all of the noise away from that process by being able to make sure that the software is installed quickly, the application is easy to stand up through .NET Aspire, and there's, and I'll even talk a little bit about standardizing Visual Studio here in a minute once we have this up and running. But I want to show is that we're finishing up here, we're optimizing the .NET assemblies, and in a moment, we'll be able to just fire this project up, and you'll see the same messages that we typically see when installation is complete. So you'll see all the same messages you get when you have a brand new installation of .NET 10, which I'm sure that we've all seen, right? It's going to ask about your certificates and all of that. So, we'll be able to kind of take a look at all of that stuff. So I'm going to jump over here to the Solution Explorer and make sure that not only that the app host is set as my startup project. I'm just going to go ahead and hit F5 on this. And we've been at this for about 17 minutes, so I think we'll beat my testing and have this maybe up and running in about 20 minutes. So that's kind of my my intention here, again, to be able to kind of show all of these different tools. And we'll have this going. We're going to start to get asked a bunch of questions here in a minute about certificates, and I'm just going to click through them really quickly because we've all seen them a bunch of times, and it's the first time that you do any kind of system setup. But I just want to stop and show everybody that they're there, pulling all this down. eShop is still using the RC1. That's okay. And I think it's also using the previous version of Aspire. So you'll see the warning at the top saying that it should be updated to 13. And I'm sure that somebody is probably getting real close to pushing that up there. Right, so this is project configured. These are all your default certificates the first time that you set up a new machine. And I'm not going to linger on these. Project is starting up. Yes, I trust it with all of my heart. First time I've run this browser. So we're going to just skip all of this. And you'll see the application is starting. And I'll just jump onto one of these guys here. And if you haven't seen it, right, these are all going to be Docker containers. I'm using Podman, the open source version of Docker. It's the same thing. At the end of the day, it's pulling all of these Docker containers down, and it's going to start this application up. And we're going to have this up and running here pretty fast. So if I come back over here, where all of these containers have been pulled down, and the ordering API, payment processor, and let's see, which one of these is the front end? Catalog API, I think it is this one, web app. We'll see, there it is. So from bare metal, to my application works using Winget to script the actual tools that you need, like your Visual Studio, your Gits, your NVMs if you're running a node and you need to switch versions of node because maybe the engineer is going to work on different projects, your Notepad++, maybe your Outlooks, your Microsoft Teams, whatever it happens to be, all of these things can be scripted out, handed to a new individual with a single command line. I just need you to run this, and they're off to the races, as you can see. And we've gone from bare metal, 20 minutes, we're up and running. So one other thing I wanted to have a little bit of a honorable mention to, as well as in this process, is Visual Studio's import and export settings wizard. So if you have a new engineer on the team and you have either a complex setup in your environment, or in Visual Studio's got a few settings or configuration settings, or you get somebody that's just struggling for some reason and their configuration settings have managed to get themselves in an unhelpful state, or if you just want to have this as a standard setup, and this is how we configure Visual Studio, and you could have you can have this as a side by side with your Winget config as well. So again, if I kind of go back to our demo project, and I'll just kind of draw everybody's attention to this. Inside of Visual Studio, you can import and export your settings. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'll export my settings. It'll ask me where I want to put them. They're all standard settings because it's a brand new system, and I'll just keep track of where we're going to put this, and I'll open it up, right? And it'll create a VS settings file for you. I'll finish this, and then we'll go take a quick look at this file in Notepad. Oh, maybe Notepad++ because we have it installed. Right, so we'll have this, and we can just go ahead and open this up, and we'll be able to see this is the configuration setting, and it's XML. It's a little tough to read, but the point is, and I won't linger on this. The point is that you can export these settings. You can make it very easy for any configuration settings that you might have on your machine to be, or as a standard baseline that you might have for your project and your team. You can export that information, and you can very easily just share that again with any of your team members. They can come in here, instead of exporting it, they can import the selected environment settings, or they can reset their settings, or whatever it happens to be. So 22 minutes up and running. I'll jump back to the slide deck. Again, honorable mention. This is definitely very handy as well, to be able to import and export your template settings, your fonts, your colors, your menu bars, your Windows layout, all of those things, so that it's very easy for somebody coming in on the team to just, here's kind of how we do things, this is how everything looks. So there's a place for you to begin. And again, very handy for your new engineers. This is here. So with that, I'm just going to jump over here and say, we're really kind of looking to be able to empower teams to go from setup to deployment in a matter of minutes. And as you just watched, that's entirely possible. Different teams are going to have different requirements when you start talking about your custom NPM sources or NuGet sources, things like that. Those will be additional steps, but most of those are fairly well and easily understood, scripted and documented processes where you may need to create some sort of SSH key or some sort of OAuth authentication, depending on what it is. But that's not going to really detract too much from this 0 to fully runnable and set up in a matter of minutes.